the audience might find this controversial, but it's a hypothesis, it's a thought, and
Mhm.
I've stuck by it.
If you had any advice for either high school students, people in school right now, or people exploring options, looking to go into responsible AI, yeah, what
Mm.
would you say is your advice?
I guess
Hello. Today I would like to welcome Dr. Osoba to the podcast. So he has done a bunch of things. I could talk about it for this whole episode, but I have written down over here. So you are currently an AI and machine learning researcher, and you also do responsible AI. But you've also previously done research at USC and RAND. I'm just curious to learn from you. Yeah, just go into all the stuff that you've worked on.
oh
But first, as kind of an icebreaker, I'd like to ask, I got a better icebreaker this time. Oh, by the way, for those of you who don't know, I actually interviewed Dr. Osoba in the past, but we're redoing the interview this time. So I got a better icebreaker. This time it is what is kind of one memory from your childhood or like early stages of getting into tech or STEM that you can think of? Like it could be your first laptop, your first
oh
encounter in a class, something like that, like your first memory of tech.
yeah, I'm guessing for most of your audience, you grew up with already a computer or a cell phone in your household. I think the first time I actually encountered a computer, I was maybe already 11, 12. And so I remember nowadays we have Wikipedia. Back then we had these Microsoft CDs called Encarta. It's like
Mhm.
an encyclopedia on a CD. And I remember just devouring the content on that CD. It was so much fun because it was very different from what we learned in school. At school,
Mhm.
it was very much you do the math, you do the physics, you do the chemistry, you do the English, and here I was just free to explore anything I thought was interesting. And of course, I ended up spending a lot of time on philosophy. And I
Mhm.
think that was actually my first introduction to philosophy. I didn't have any philosophy books in my at my house back in the day, so I got very focused on this German philosopher Hegel. He
Mhm.
had this idea of the thesis meeting the antithesis and forming a synthesis and a world spirit that sort of captures the order of ideas and history at the current time. And it it was very I didn't think it was real in the sense
Mhm.
of physics or chemistry being real, but it was just very liberating to have to not really be focused on what things that are real, just general ideas that might help understand the world better. So it was fun.
Wow.
I spent too much time on that.
Yeah, I mean, that's definitely much better than like what the internet is now for kids. At 11 or 12, that's crazy. You were looking at philosophers and exploring the
I was
encyclopedia on
bored.
CD.
I was very bored.
Yeah, I
That's a
mean, that's a
general theme
great,
across my life. I get
yeah.
bored very quickly and I do something.
Like starting things because you're bored. I mean,
Yeah.
that's cool. The first thing I kind of like to get into is um, how did your kind of journey into research begin? And,
Mm.
like what kind of brought you here?
I already knew quite early that I was going to spend a lot of time studying. I didn't know exactly what that meant. This was way back when I was 8, 9, 10. Uh, Over time, I began to settle on the idea of being a professor. As you can tell, I didn't end up being a professor full time, but that was the general direction I was going. Largely because uh, while I enjoy practical things, I sort of also enjoy exploring the foundations and the abstract part of the practical things. So I got into research because when I finished my electrical engineering undergraduate degree, I I was, I guess the term I always use is nerd sniped by this idea of information. Like you
Hmm.
take like the signals that you process on your cell phone, they are these mathematical entities that we use very interesting Fourier transforms to try to understand and parse and redirect. And so I, it just seemed like a powerful framing, a powerful setup. And I wanted to understand more, and I had ideas for what I wanted to do or what I wanted to explore. And so a lot of my colleagues in my undergraduate class, they were going off and getting jobs in engineering companies. And it made a lot of sense. And part of the reason why you would do an electrical engineering degree back in the day, this was in 2005, was it was one of the highest paying undergraduate degrees. Once you got out, you get a job that was quite well supported. But I didn't think I was done. I thought I had some more things to explore. So I took that curiosity and went off, applied to graduate school. I got lucky in the sense of getting into a couple of graduate schools where one of them was able to fund most of my time. And yeah, and I found the most the most eccentric professor, and I worked with him, and
Eccentric.
yeah,
Okay.
it was fun. It was I learned a lot, and a lot of my technical training developed extensively in grad school, but also my life skills, my ability to consider to explore ideas in society, philosophy, politics got expanded partly because of
Mhm.
the my mentor at grad school. So I think what led me to grad school, led me to research, primarily curiosity. I didn't think I was done. Um, I didn't think I was done exploring, and so I found a place that nurtured that. And once you start, it's hard to stop because then you're always in the mode of why is this way? Can things be better? How do I make things better? And yeah, it just becomes a natural mode after that. So I think the real anchor point is the path into the research frame in the first place. After that,
Mhm.
it's self-sustaining. At least that's been
Yeah.
the
I
case in
mean,
my
that's such great
system.
advice. Just like the drive of curiosity bringing you there, first of
Hmm.
all. Yeah.
Hmm.
I mean, you can tell from even when you were a young age, just that curiosity was bringing you to the next place, the next stage in your life. I'd also like to ask, on like the other end, kind of what were some of the biggest mistakes or like challenges, I guess, that you've made
Mm.
thus far that kind of stood out to you that you learned from in a way?
I remember back in maybe 2018, I was exploring opportunities. I was already at a job doing research, and as happens sometimes, people call you up asking if you're interested in working with them on something. And I was hyper focused at the time on AI policy, AI fairness in the context of what I will refer to as classical machine learning decision-making systems. So there's a regression models, classification models, anything of that type, compared to what I would refer to as non-classical generative AI models or LLMs and the like. And because I was so hyper focused on the classical form of machine learning, uh, I didn't quite. This sounds like a weird complaint. I didn't quite want to spend enough mental bandwidth trying to think through policies around generative models and large language models.
Mm.
Um, and then 2021 happened, the ChatGPT moment. And the reason why it's a regret for me is not because I can't, I don't now work on that. The reason it's a regret for me is because I like periods where you can invest early on and build up the mental equity around a problem before the
Mhm.
problem becomes urgent. And so I
Oh,
deprived myself of that opportunity essentially, and I regret that.
yeah.
But we all catching up, and so
Yeah. I
it's
mean,
not.
you took a chance, but you took a chance the other direction. Yeah.
Mm, mm,
I mean, yeah, that happens. That's an interesting thing. Like I've spoken to many other people, and most of them talk about, oh, their challenges with either not getting into something or not getting.
mm,
But this is an interesting one because it's more about like investing your time and
mm,
like going into a specific topic.
mm,
So kind of pivoting now, I just want to talk about like specifically your work, like you mentioned responsible AI and ethical AI. Like
mm.
how does your work tie into that? And what exactly does that mean for people who don't really know what that is?
I maybe will try to distinguish, maybe not fruitfully. I'll try to distinguish between responsible AI and ethical AI, largely because I don't think I can say I know what ethical AI is. I know that it's important to try to achieve an ethical standard on AI, but I don't
Mhm.
know what that standard is. So I'm
Yeah.
okay
Maybe
with
it's
focusing on
unattainable. Yeah.
um, and do I want to agree with that? I don't know. Um,
Yeah.
I think what I do know is that the the effort, the intention, and like the conscious attempt to continuously try to achieve some type of ethical version of AI is important, and in my
Hmm.
head sufficient. Whether it actually achieves it is a different thing. So focusing on responsible AI, I guess when I think of responsible AI, the scoping around it is how do we have these entities, these I don't want to let's not call them entities. We have these artifacts in the world, these artificially intelligent artifacts, and they interact with society. They interact with individuals, groups of people, countries, and stuff like that. And they don't just exist naturally. They are created by other humans, human institutions, ostensibly to serve society. What is a way of ordering the interaction between these artificially intelligent artifacts and society and humans within that in such a way that they are enabling the well-being of all humans, of all people? Uh, so that's a large scope way of thinking about it. In practice, the large scope version of it I may not have all the structures and details of how that should work in large scope. But in practice, in the microcosm level, there is a sense in which we can talk about, okay, the things we expect from anything that actually affects humans. We expect some type of accountability. If something goes wrong, who do we turn to when something goes wrong? We expect some type of transparency. We want to understand where the AI systems fit and where what they touch and what they don't touch. Those two things are sort of minimal. Now, besides the accountability and transparency, there are value-laden concepts like, okay, what is the prescriptive norm to apply here? What does it mean for if we usually when we're talking about things interacting with people, there's a question of fairness, justice, and the like. What does it mean for the use of an AI system to be fair? What does it mean for it to use energy responsibly? So I think of as an umbrella concept that contains under it fairness, also contains under it things like energy concerns. So that's sort of like a broad brush of how I'm thinking about responsible AI. I'm not I'm not the sole authority of the topic, but that's how I've been approaching it.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, that's fascinating because you also brought up like both obviously the use of the AI tool and also how it's developed, like energy concerns and stuff like that, which is I think what many people forget, including myself.
Mm.
Um, yeah, I think it's important. So, which branch within all of this, under this broad umbrella of responsible AI, where do you fall into and your work fall into this?
Primarily, I'm focused on fairness. I expand a little bit beyond fairness to sort of accountability, making sure there is clear path for protesting the outcomes of the use of an AI system. But primarily, my main planting is in the fairness space. How do we make sure the use of both classical and generative AI systems, how do we make sure those uses are serving the human counterparts in a responsible way, in a fair way?
Hmm. Interesting. So, more with the usage of the tool itself. It's
Mhm.
interesting.
Yeah,
Yeah.
okay. This is an interesting point, an interesting aspect. So in the literature and in my interaction with other researchers, uh, from the very beginning, there was a strong emphasis on not just thinking about the tool use, not just thinking about where it fits, but thinking very carefully about the demographics of the folks who actually are responsible for developing those systems. And the idea there being that if the developers and the institutions in which the developers are embedded, if they don't have the requisite uh, diversity, then they are more likely than not uh, to make decisions that are not serving the broader population in all its diversity. I tend not to I agree with that perspective, but I tend not to focus on that as much for a couple of reasons, or maybe just one primarily. I think and the audience might find this controversial, but it's a hypothesis, it's a thought, and
Hmm.
I've stuck by it. Uh, so when we talk about representation in the cohort of AI developers and institutions embedding AI developers, what usually happens is we end up looking almost immediately at engineers, technical folk. We exist. The context we're embedded in right now is one in which there is a diversity problem in engineering schools, in computer science programs. So if your prerequisite for achieving responsible, fair AI is that the developing class, let's call them that, have to be diverse, you're you it's not clear to me how that works. The
Mhm.
pipeline is not zero, but it's not enough to sort of penetrate to permeate all the spaces in which the systems are being developed. And so I think it's possible, and I think it's not too ambitious to say that uh, if you have a cohort of developers within an institution, even if they're not diverse, you can embed practices, processes, consultative processes within those developer communities that can make them less likely to make errors that don't serve the diverse community without requiring that that developer class be diverse. That's the long run goal, is that the developer class becomes more and more diverse, but that's not where we are right now. So we have to do something. So that's how I think about it. I know that's a
Yeah.
tangent. Maybe you didn't ask for it, but that it came up in conversation recently, and
No,
I just
yeah.
wanted to highlight that.
So when you mention like consulting processes to kind of
Mm.
interrupt, like what exactly do you mean by that?
I don't have the answer, the full answer to that, but the very basic one of the prerequisites, and this is a principle of voice in I guess it comes up in different areas, but political science is one. The idea being that when something affects uh, a population, they should have, like democratic idealism, they should have some voice in being able to direct the the boundaries of that thing. So, for example, let's be concrete. Let's say Pinterest wants to change its algorithm for recommending or ranking things to show members. The member community can say, "We are the ones who's been affected by your recommendation algorithms. So we'd like to have some input into what you
Mm.
consider important, interesting, valuable for doing that recommendation." It doesn't have to be that direct, and a little bit helps. A lot is always better, but although there are problems with having a lot of democratic input, a little bit being at the very least, any population that's affected by an AI system should be able to voice dissent, say you guys have caused harm in XYZ ways. If there is no way that can happen, then that's a failure already.
Yeah.
So there's small consultation, there's large consultation. Each of them have their own pros and cons, but zero consultation, I think, is at least in my book, zero consultation with the affected population is unacceptable.
Yeah. So is this like concept of consultation with the population, is this a concept from philosophy or is it specific
Yeah.
to responsible
No,
um
no, no, it's not. Oh, no, no, no.
oh,
Very little is specific to responsible AI.
oh,
We are
okay.
borrowing from everywhere. I think when I first encountered the concept of voice, it was in the work of Hannah Arendt, and she was
Mhm.
talking about how how political societies sort of develop and what makes for a good one. It's also come up in uh, there's a term. So in the public policy and policy analysis space, there is a term. I think it's called participatory modeling.
Mhm.
So in most of the time when you're doing a policy research project, your client is say you're trying to help the city allocate water more efficiently to its population. So your client is technically as a researcher, policy researcher, is technically the city, but the city's policies and whatever it advises it to do will affect all the city residents. And so in participatory modeling, you would be taking inputs and ideas and reviewing the feedback from the actual city members. So that's one way in which it comes across. So it's not unique to responsible AI. It's not original to responsible AI. You'll see it in philosophy. You'll see it in political science. You'll see it in policy analysis. Actually, there's a famous theory is it the right term? Framework in political science called the exit, vote, or leave. So if you're thinking about countries where people have concerns about their governments, what are the options available to them. They can either, is it exit? I forget it. It's EVL. They can either leave, they can either voice their dissent, or there's a third piece that I'm missing.
Hmm.
But so that's another situation in which the idea of voice comes into play. So
Interesting.
it has a storied history. It's not just
Yeah.
responsible AI.
I mean, that's fascinating. I just want to pivot a little bit and say, if you had any advice for either high school students, people in school right now, or people exploring options, looking to go into responsible AI and the field that you are in, um, yeah, what
Mm.
would you say is your advice?
Um, I guess um, first of all, know your strengths. Um,
Hmm.
I think the space is large enough to accommodate people with a diverse set of strengths.
Hmm.
I think part of the reason why that's the case is because AI systems have so many touch points in different aspects of life. So if your natural inclination is to think about things in terms of laws, there's a whole field of how do I create laws? How do I prosecute laws that involve the interaction between AI and humans? If your natural inclination is to be hyper technical, of course, there are lots of tech programs that would happily
Hmm.
welcome you and your interest in both the technical side as well as the policy and societal side. Um, if you are more of a community organizing person, that's a big deal. You, you going forward, and we're already seeing this with the large language model companies. Going forward, there's going to be an increasing amount of friction, not necessarily a bad thing, increasing amount of friction and interaction between AI developing companies and communities. So right now, for example, you would see um, authors, like creative content creators, saying these large language models have scraped the entire work without necessarily compensating them. So that interaction is going to require community organizers to help shape the eventual solution to that. So
Hmm.
first of all, I'd say, yeah, know your interests, know your strengths, and then yeah, just be curious. I guess the second know your strengths. The second piece would probably be it helps to have a focus on on the well-being of humans.
Hmm.
And I
Of
don't mean
course.
that I don't when I say that people hear that and say, "Oh, are you saying people who don't have that forefront are bad?" That's not what I mean. I mean it's hard to do this work if you're not concerned
Mm,
to a deep extent about that.
yeah. Like it's something you're truly passionate about and interested in.
Yeah,
Yeah. And it's focused on humans or the communities,
yeah,
like you said.
exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. When I started doing my engineering degree back in the day, I cannot say I cared much about about society. I was smart. I liked math. I liked engineering,
Mhm.
and that's what I wanted to do. And as I matured, it became more important to me to do some type of service to society,
Yeah.
and I was like, okay, what do I know how to do, and where is the need, and that's how I ended up in responsible AI.
Fascinating. Yeah. I don't want to take up too much of your time, obviously, but do you have any kind of remaining thoughts or like last thoughts that you want to leave with the audience? It could be about any of your work. It could be about, you just mentioned about career and research and AI ethics and
Mm,
stuff like that. Anything like that.
mm. Um, I don't, yeah, there is not much else I can give in terms of advice. I think
Yeah.
advice is always tough. I don't envy your generation. The environment is not getting easier, and increasingly, it's hard to imagine what the next few decades hold for you, especially in the United States. So it's hard for me to say there is a piece of advice that will get you through. Um, I guess the one thing I've been thinking a lot about, and I think it ties up to the last point I was making, caring about your community and your fellow human is not a bad thing. It
Yeah.
doesn't necessarily mean you're at a disadvantage in terms of making money. Um, Empathy is not a bad thing. Virtue signaling is what we are
Very
supposed to be
controversial.
doing. It's weird. I don't know what your audience thinks about that, but it's very weird to me that the idea of
No,
virtue
no, no, I'm
signaling
just
is
kidding.
controversial.
Yeah.
No, I understand you're kidding, but
Yeah.
I think there are people out there who don't who actually think it's controversial.
Oh, wow. Okay.
It is really weird to me, and I do think what makes for a full life in the long run are virtues and caring about the well-being of your community, however big or small. So
Mhm.
you can make a good living doing that. So it's not you don't have to be a starving artist to do that well. So I
Yeah.
guess that's all I'll say about that.
Definitely. I mean, thank you so much for being here for this podcast interview. I enjoyed our discussion. I feel like I've learned so much, especially your focus on helping humans and helping the community really stuck with me. And I hope that stuck with the audience as well. Thank you.
Have a good day.